of Mission, Solana Flora.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Sally Flora, and I am the mayor of Mission, Kansas. I would like to welcome you all to the Pearl Harbor Survivors Remembrance Ceremony on the 84th anniversary of the attack on Pearl Harbor. This is to get everyone's attention because in a couple of moments it will be 11:55 a.m., which is 7:55 a.m. Hawaii time. This is the time of the attack on Pearl Harbor, which began on December 7th, 1941. In just another minute, we will begin our moment of silence. Please join me for a moment of silence. Please rise if you are able for the presentation of colors by American Legion Post 370 Honor Guard. Please remain standing as we join in saying the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
You may now be seated. Today we are gathered to remember and honor Pearl Harbor survivors as well as other veterans of World War II for their sacrifices in the fight for freedom. We would also like to recognize veterans and current members of the armed services who are actively engaged in the protection of freedom throughout the world. We ask that you stand or raise your hand as we honor those who have served in the United States Air Force, the United States Army, the United States Coast Guard, the United States Marine Corps, and the United States Navy. Thank you for your service. I would like to now reintroduce Penn Almany, our Director of Parks and Recreation, who will share a short history of Pearl Harbor Memorial Park.
Pearl Harbor Memorial Park park was dedicated in 2004 after a request by mission resident and Pearl Harbor survivor, Dorwin Lamkin, who was looking for a way to honor survivors. Members of the Pearl Harbor Survivors Association worked to secure funding for the park's benches, which are engraved with the names of 56 surviving Pearl Harbor veterans who were living in eastern Kansas at the time. The anchor that rises above the park is on permanent loan from the US Navy. Pearl Harbor Memorial Park is home to a relic from the USS Arizona. This relic was secured by Mr. Lamkin and added to the park in 2010. The park has hosted many events throughout the years, including VJ Day and Pearl Harbor Remembrance Day, and most recently a memorial tree planting ceremony recognizing Dorwin Lamkin's efforts. Speaking of efforts, I'd like to recognize the advocacy and tireless efforts of our dear friend Susan Pepperdine, who had died on March 27, 2022. She was an ardent supporter of veterans through many channels, including FISH, Friends in Service of Heroes, and the instrumental leader of the Pearl Harbor Survivors Association. We will miss her and her many contributions. Lastly, I'd like to recognize Dorinda Nicholson, who is not in attendance today. She was 6 years old during the attack when her family lived by Pearl Harbor. Her book, Pearl Harbor Child, describes her experiences, and we appreciate that she continues to share her story with both children and adults. We're pleased to introduce our special speaker today, Dennis D.M. Giangreco, who is well known for authoring the book Hell to Pay, Operation Downfall and the Invasion of Japan, 1945 to 1947. This year he also introduced, or actually in 2023, he introduced his most recent book, Truman and the Bomb. So I now invite D.M. Giangreco, author.
Looking at the clock over there because it was at this very moment 4,000 miles away and 84 years ago that the battleship Oklahoma, where nearly 500 sailors and Marines died, was just starting to capsize. It's roll over on its side after being struck by a third Japanese torpedo. And the USS Arizona was just a few agonizing minutes from exploding from this point when an aerial bomb penetrated its armored deck. Sometimes the number is 2,317, sometimes 2,403. These are the figures one usually sees for the number killed in action and died of wounds from Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor. And they're terrible. But of course, they're only a piece of the story. The Japanese attack left 9,000 sailors without ships, including 1,000 wounded and injured, most of whom actually did return to duty fairly quickly. Now, what happened to these survivors of the attack? Pearl Harbor survivors fought and died in every major action in the Pacific, and most of those deaths occurred in just the first year of fighting. None of the ships in the Pacific at the time of the Japanese attack, were fully crewed. The Arizona, for example, was short by about 200 men, and almost to a man, these now shipless sailors were assigned to fill out the crews of surviving warships and those arriving immediately from the West Coast, at Pearl. Large numbers of these sailors would soon find themselves engaged in a long series of 1942 naval actions in the Solomon Islands and other battles where fully 29 more American warships went to the bottom, including 4 fleet carriers, 5 heavy cruisers, 2 light cruisers, 7 submarines, 25 destroyers, and 34 other ships. That first year's brutal attrition Really, the first year's brutal attrition and massive growth of the Pacific Fleet that began in earnest by the end of 42 soon lessened the survivors' strong presence throughout the fleet. And although U.S. naval losses were less severe in 1943, Doris Miller, for example, the first black recipient of the Navy Cross, was among the roughly 650 men killed when the carrier Liscome Bay was torpedoed near Macon and Tarawa Islands in November of 43. It's likely that Miller was not the only Pearl Harbor survivor aboard the Liscome Bay, and he and others suddenly without ships had initially been assigned to the heavy cruiser Indianapolis a week after the surprise attack. Some of you here, I'm sure, are familiar that the Indianapolis itself was sunk with staggering losses just before the Japanese surrender in 1945. Of the roughly 600 to 650, the number's a little fuzzy, shipboard Marines at Pearl on December 7, most of the 109 killed that day were from the Arizona, where 73 of the 88 aboard died. Nearly all of the surviving Marines were swept up into the 1st Marine Division and were soon shipped to a place called Guadalcanal, then Cape Gloucester, then Peleliu, then Okinawa, and did not survive the war. Heart-wrenching as all of this is, these deaths were among those who'd been at Pearl Harbor were only a small fragment of the cost in American blood during World War II. The United States had entered the war late, and because of its sheer distance from Europe and the Western Pacific, it did not begin to experience casualties comparable to those of the other belligerents until the conflict's last year. By then, the US Army alone was losing soldiers at a rate that Americans today would find absolutely unbelievable during what was called the casualty surge of June 1944 through June 1945. Beginning with the invasions of the Mariana Islands at Normandy, U.S. Army losses averaged 65,000 men per month, with the November, December, and January figures standing at an astounding 72,000, 88,000, and 79,000, respectively, in post-war tabulations. And these figures did not even include the Navy and Marine casualties. Bill True, who fought in Normandy, Belgium, Germany, he found that, quote, in the heat of a battle, you don't mourn a fallen comrade. Years later is when you really feel it and really mourn buddies that died. Johnny Sepko was a little guy and one of the youngest guys in the company. To stand at his grave in Normandy and know that I've lived a full life and had children and grandchildren, but he'll always be a boy who died there. I think the best thing, said veteran Wally Parr, is if you can think of all those who made the supreme sacrifice, remember the real meaning of that. They gave away all of their tomorrows for our today. Thank you for having me here today.
Thank you, Dennis. Thanks for sharing those unique and powerful insights. I'd now like to introduce Mike Shannon. He's a Vietnam veteran and former radio and television personality who will be reading the names of local Pearl Harbor survivors. Mike?
Thank you, Ben. Good afternoon. As you may know, 2 marble benches at the nearby Pearl Harbor Park feature the names of 56 servicemen who were members of the local chapter of the Pearl Harbor Survivors Association. I'm going to read the names of these fallen comrades. The tolling of the bell after each name will serve as a tribute to their military service. Carl Appleberry, John Berry, John Babcock, Joe Brandt, Jimmy Black, Orville Brewer, Jack Carson, Carl Christensen, Eddie Christensen, John Coburn, Raymond Kozad, Jesse Duddigan, Buddy Durant, Ralph Geringer, James Geitz, Louis Graham, Mose Gross, Gordon Haley, Harold Hall, James Harvey, Harry Helmsing, Charles Hine, Robert Holcomb, James Jackson, Woodrow Jones, Jack Jorgensen, Amon Carr, David Keller, James Kennedy, Fritz Croft, Dorwin Lamkin, Edward Lyons, Stanley Levitt, Donald Lowry, H.P. Monslow, Vernon Moore, Eugene Perkins, Clifford Pitts, Francis Riley, Charles Reicher, Robert Rowlands, Edmund Russell, Edgeliff Schmidt, Don Spitzinger, Ken Spray, Vernon Stevens, Kenneth Stevens, H.O. Turner, William Tucker, Cliff Walton, Robert Wheeler, William Widener, Richard Williams, Norman Winkler, John Yates, Robert Zillner. May their memories live on and may they rest in peace. Taps will now be played courtesy of the American Legion Post 370 Honor Guard.
Thank you, Mike. Please stand and join me in one final remembrance of our veterans of World War II in the Pacific Theater during the placement of the wreath by the American Legion Post 370 Honor Guard. You may now be seated. If you haven't already, please visit Pearl Harbor Memorial Park in person. Dennis Jane Greco will be available to answer any questions you may have in the next few minutes. Thank you for participating in today's ceremony in remembrance of our fallen veterans. Have a great day.